Hey everyone, welcome back to a second part in the thrilling three-part series on how we build end-to-end CI/CD capabilities with GitHub Actions. I'm Sydney Andrews. I've been your host in the first part of this series, and I'm really excited to get right back into the code, right back into the demos with you again. Today, we are going to go and talk about building continuous integration with our JavaScript applications using GitHub Actions. Got a couple of slides I'm going to show you right at the beginning, just a little bit of housekeeping, a little bit of refreshing, jogging our memory, and then we are going to be really heavy with the demos today. So again, just really excited to be just jumping right back into things. If you haven't seen the first part of our series, this is part of a YouTube playlist. So if you just jump to the homepage of this channel, you'll see the playlist right there on the homepage. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please do. Set up that notification so you know when we go live. We're going live all month with six different webinar sessions, a three-part series on JavaScript CI/CD with GitHub Actions, and a three-part series on .NET CI/CD with Azure Pipelines. So it's just all sorts of DevOps excitement and excitedness. I'm losing my words today because I'm just excited. I've been working on these demos for a couple of weeks now, and I'm just really excited to get these in front of you. So, without further ado, just want to really dig in. Housekeeping. I'm Sydney Andrews. I'm an Azure MVP and a Microsoft certified trainer. Two things I'm going to pop up a couple times here and there, but I like to talk about them right up front. If you got questions, we have a chat, so feel free to pop your questions in the chat. I'm going to try to answer them if I see them. And if I don't see them, we got an email, msusdev@microsoft.com. That's also in the description box here on YouTube, msusdev@microsoft.com. If you think of a question that didn't answer in the chat, if you think of a really tough question 3 months from now, and the YouTube comments, you just don't feel like we answered it successfully, msusdev@microsoft.com. If we don't have the answer, we'll find somebody with the answer. We try to really help you out, come up with solutions to some of the toughest problems you have. And then we're trying to be open source about these webinars. So github.com, msusdev, end-to-end CI/CD. We have all of these slides that you're looking at right now. All of the demos I'm going to show you today. All the demos I've shown in previous sessions. All of the slides I've shown in previous sessions. They're all available on GitHub in Markdown. Available in GitHub releases as PowerPoint files. If you want to go show this off to your team, if you want to fork the repo and make your own version of this, please. They're licensed so you can fork it, manipulate it, you can change it, you can PR. Do whatever you want. This is for you to go out and be amazing with. That was my housekeeping. This is the second part of a three-part series. If you missed the first part, that was introduction to GitHub Actions. That's where I really went into the YAML syntax, talked about how we could build a workflow using YAML, just went into the nuts and bolts. We iterated, we built the YAML file line by line. We built our first workflow. We went through line by line. We broke it on purpose. We fixed it on purpose. Today, I'm going to just really be firing this workflow file really fast. So if I'm firing it too fast and you say, you know what? I really have no idea what you mean. Sydney, you went in and you said run, name, steps, container. I, I don't know what any of that means. You're moving too fast. Please jump back in the playlist. Look at session number 1. We go very slowly through all of that, and I recommend you take a look at that. Even if you understand everything I mean and you just want a refresher, please do. Next week, we're going to, same time, same day, we're going to look at deploying our code to Azure with GitHub Actions. So we're going to take everything we learned today and then go to the CD side of the field, and we're going to take our code and we're going to push it to production, and we're going to take GitHub Actions and push our code to Azure. And we're going to look at it both from pushing our raw code into a production service and Dockerizing our code and pushing it as a container and pushing it into containerized services. All right, quick agenda today. I'm going to just do a really quick refresher of GitHub Actions. So if you missed the first session, the 2-minute catch up, just get everybody level set. And then I'm going to really focus on two things. I'm going to focus on automating a build for a demo web application. One is open sourced on GitHub, so you can clone it, you can mess around with it, do whatever you want. And then we're going to talk about Dockerizing it. And I'm going to use mostly a local build environment that I have Visual Studio Code on my local machine. I'm going to use that for all of the demos today. But every once in a while, I'm going to show you how you do the same thing in GitHub Code Spaces if you don't want to mess around with anything on your local machine. I promise, not a lot of slides. That was the end of my slides today. I'm going to have a couple of review slides at the end, but everything else from here on out is going to be all code, and that's the way I prefer it. So let's just jump in. I'm going to open up a browser, and I have my browser open, and I'm going to go to github.com/msusdevexamples. So all the links I'm sharing with you today are in the description box, but I'm going to just pop an overlay real quick for those who didn't see that. github.com/msusdevexamples. Now, this is just a nice little org we have where all of our example code is, and we have this really cool repository, Contoso Spaces Next Web App. And this is a web application we're going to use in a lot of our demos in sessions 2 and 3. And this is just a really simple meeting spaces web application. It's pretty cool because it allows us to go in and it's just a generic Next web app, Next being a framework built on top of React, and it gives us a really good starting point for a lot of our examples. Now, this is a template repository, so we could click use this template and deploy this template into one of our own organizations. So I'm not going to deploy this to my personal account. I'm going to deploy this to msusdev examples. I'm going to create a repository called March 3rd. Since today is March 3rd, it makes it a little bit easier for me to find this later. So I'll say March 3rd, and I'm just going to make this a public repository. So if you're watching this recording later, you may be able to find this repository. So create a new repository for template, and this is where we're going to be running all of today's examples. Now we have a repository called March 3rd, and essentially what we're going to do here is this is where we're going to be running all of our examples. Now, just as a refresher, we're going to create another repository. I know I say we're creating repositories all over the place. This is where I'm just going to just do a level set for us. Going to call this. This is just going to be a blank one. March 3rd, part 2. Got to spell part 2 correctly. It's going to be a public repository. It's going to have a README file. This is just so we can use GitHub code spaces here. Hit create repository. March 3rd, part 2. I'm going to open it in GitHub code spaces. And I'm just going to create a really simple node project here. And we're going to use this just so we all remember from session 1 where we're at as far as GitHub Actions. So session 1, we're able to build a really simple GitHub action workflow to go in and build a node project. So going back on what we remember, we created a node project, had a gitignore file. So .gitignore. That I think we ignored the node modules folder. And I know I get fussed at about this in the comments all the time, but the package.json file. I created a package.json file. And in there, I called this simple app. And it had the entry point or main is app.js. The app.js file, let's see, npm install moment, and I'll save that to my package.json file. I'll use the moment library, and I'll just say console.log hello world r moment equals require moment. And I'm just checking my notes, make sure we're doing the same exact thing we did in session 1. We'll just do that double L format, console.log the current date. That's exactly what we did. Just to test it out, I'll run node app.js, hello world, March 3rd, 2022. Everything looks good. All right, we're going to create a .github/workflows build.yaml file. And this is all same things we did in session 1. So a simple node project, nothing complex here. We're going to name this workflow node basic build, own a push to this repository. We're going to have a list of jobs with one job called build. I need two spaces here. Build node. The fancy display name is going to be build node with proper capitalization. And then it's going to runs on Ubuntu latest. And then the container we're actually going to run it on is node 14. It's going to have an array of steps. But the first step is to run a script, checks the version of node with a display name, check node version. Then it's going to, we did a whole bunch of other stuff like npm version, check npm version. I believe we ran another script, npm install, that we did a uses, actions checkout, version 2, checkout code, install npm packages. And then we have one more step. We ran node app.js, and we had a fancy name, run application. So just real quick refresh. We named this node basic build. It runs on push, single job, build our node application, build node application, runs on Ubuntu latest, runs in a Docker container, node tag 14, check the node version, check the npm version, check out our code, install npm packages, and then run our node application. I'm just doing this just to make sure we're all on the same page about what we know about GitHub Actions. So go in. This should work, or we are in trouble. All right, go back to March 3rd, part 2. You go in, there's a build node application. We requested an agent with the label Ubuntu latest. Just checking the chat. No questions so far. And by the way, every single thing I just typed is in our slides and source code. Popping that link up just in case you're looking for it. It's also in the description box for our video. All right, it's downloaded that Node 14 container. Checking the version of Node, checking npm, checking our code, installing npm packaging, running our application, and it is done. So we're not crazy. Everything is working. So we know how to use GitHub Actions. That's a good start. We have our web application, so we have enough to get running. So there's a couple things we know about this application. This is a Next.js application. It has a package JSON file. So if we open this package JSON file, we have a script object. It tells us a couple things we should know. If we want to run this in dev, we can run npm run dev. And we can also run npm run build if we want to create a build of this application, and npm run start if we want to start this application after we have built it. Okay, this is all useful information. Now, since we have a repo here, we can run this both locally and in an environment like GitHub Codespaces. And I'll show you both. So I'm going to run this in GitHub Codespaces, and I'll also clone this locally. So I have GitHub Codespaces spinning up over here, and I will clone this to my local machine. I have Visual Studio Code open in an empty folder called dev, and I have Windows Terminal. So I'll git clone that repo to my local machine. Here we go. I have it open in my local machine. And I remember it's called npm install to install my npm packages locally. That'll take a second. Once that's installed, I'll just npm run dev, and that will allow me to run the application locally. Let me go double check to see the status of Codespaces. Looks like Codespaces is ready to go. I'll do the same thing over here. npm install, installing my npm package dependencies, and npm run dev. I'll show you a really cool thing about GitHub Codespaces. If it opens up a dev application on a port, you can just click open in browser, and it will route the port and open it in a new tab for you. It allows you to test the application out. It's pretty cool. That way you don't have to actually open up a public website or do all sorts of crazy stuff. So here we go. Here's our test application. We can explore locations and look at a landing page for a specific location. So it's, pretty cool, office or collaboration rental website, nice little test website that we can use. So it looks like everything works. We can control C, close the dev on site. We'll go check out. Looks like npm install is done running locally. Get npm run dev and see that, all right, the dev server is running locally. We click localhost 3000. We go back to my browser and we see that the website is also running locally. Everything works good. Everything's good to go locally. So, we're in great space. Everything runs both locally and, in GitHub code spaces. So the application works. We know we're starting from a good place here. All right. So we have a working application. We know how to build it on our local machine. We know how to run it on our local machine. Let's actually start building out a GitHub action for this. So you saw me build out a GitHub action for a simple node application. Let's do it for this web application. We know we need to create a YAML file in the .github/workflows folder. And we know that the name is arbitrary. We remember all of that from session one. So instead of build.yaml, I'm going to call it integration.yaml just to prove out that point. And you can have as many YAML files in here as you want. That's just an arbitrary decision of your team. So today I'm using integration.yaml. Tomorrow it could be any other name that makes sense for me. So integration.yaml today. And from here, I'm going to give it whatever name makes sense. So name, build next.js web application. And I'm just going to keep the filter or trigger simple. So on push, going to create a job. And my first job is to build my project. Now I'm going to give it a nice display name, build project. And we're going to run on Ubuntu latest. Now I'm going to keep things simple. I know that the agent that's running the build has all the tools necessary to build this project, so I'm not worried about containers, anything today. We tested all that out on session one. We're going to really hyper focus on doing multiple jobs and creating artifacts today and sharing them between jobs. So let's create some simple steps based upon the things we know. One of the first things we know is that with our steps, we want to check out our code. So we could type in uses actions checkout version 2. But one other thing you'll see a lot in GitHub's documentation is that you can also start by just with the name. So name, checkout code, and then after that, put your uses statement. Now, this is pretty nice because with this dash name, it just makes it a little bit more readable for somebody looking at your YAML file. Okay, this first step is to check out our code, and we're using the action checkout too. Okay, I mean, that's just really a preference of your team. You saw earlier, I was doing dash run dash uses, 100% up to you how you want to do it. Let's do another one. Name install npm dependencies. Node package manager dependencies. We're gonna do that by running npm install. I'll do one last one. Name, build, project, assets. Now, we know that we have an npm script in here called build. We activate that by npm, or we execute that by going npm run build. Npm run build. That should be enough for us to be dangerous. Let's commit this by implement simple build. To commit this, sync our changes up, and let's just jump back to GitHub. So just jump back up, go to GitHub Actions. There's a build Next.js web application workflow. It looks like I have a typo somewhere. Workflow is not valid. Unexpected value runs. So it looks like I have a typo. Run. Just want to make sure okay, so it's runs own, not runs. This is a typo from earlier. You probably remember earlier where I had the first YAML file and it's runs own Ubuntu latest, not runs. That's just a typo I had from earlier. I apologize about that. That's one of the things about doing these live. One of the great things about it is they let the YAML And there we go. Fixed no typo. We're building our project. That's one of the beauties about working on these iteratively. For the people just joining, you can always ask questions in the chat. If you have any questions after the session is over, msusdev at Microsoft.com. We're here to help. And all of the source code for all the demos I'm showing today are on GitHub. GitHub.com, msusdev, end-to-end CI/CD. All of the links I'm sharing on the screen right now are also available in the description box on this YouTube video. So please, feel free to click on all these links. We got lots more to show today. I'm probably going to run over time, but that's perfectly fine. Really excited to show off a lot of stuff. This went a whole lot faster than I expected. So let's walk through what happened. We checked out our code. So our Next.js web application code checked out. We installed our dependencies for Node Package Manager, so npm. Wonderful. We ran npm run build, which ran the Next.js build tool. It built our application. Perfect, perfect. And that was it. That's all we've done so far. So far so good. Let's look so good. Let's start implementing some more features. So now that we have our build, it built everything into the .next folder. We know that because when we ran build locally, it created this .next folder with the results of our build. Now, eventually, I want to take all this content and put it somewhere. So we have this separation of concerns when we're dealing with GitHub Actions, where we want to take our assets and share them between jobs. Now, we know that jobs run on separate agents. The agents, we're not guaranteed that two different jobs are going to run on the same agent. So we need to share data between different agents. And we do this by creating build artifacts. And so we need to take this next folder that's created as the output of our build and create an artifact so that one agent, which is our build agent, um, will upload this build artifact, and then our release agent can download the build artifact and then perform a release. So knowing that, we need to go in and go to GitHub Actions, which is the organization where GitHub has all their different actions. And essentially, we need to get an action to upload an artifact. Well, this is the organization, github.com/actions. I'm actually about to pop this up on the screen real quick. So github.com/actions, you're going to see that on your screen real quick. And also everything I'm going to pop it on your screen is in the description box. There is an upload action, upload artifact. And the cool thing about that, by the way, everything's in the description box. Um, the cool thing about this upload artifact action is it allows me to point at a file or a folder and upload that as a build artifact. So they have lots of examples. So if we want to upload an individual file, so in this example, they make a directory and they echo hello to a text file, and they use actions upload artifact version 3. And then they just say, hey, here's the name of the artifact, and here's the path to the file. Wonderful. Or they upload an entire directory. They named it my artifact and just point it to the directory. You can use wildcard patterns, you can do exclusions, all sorts of things you can do here. So for our purposes, we know that we need to upload the next folder. So for our purposes, this is going to be good enough. We need to upload an entire directory. So we need to use actions upload artifact v3 with name and path. Okay, let's give it a try. So the name of this is upload static site content. We're going to use actions upload artifact version 3. Now remember, the with keyword means that we're going to provide parameters or properties to a GitHub action. Now, going back to the example is we need name and path. So the name of this, I'm using static site, and the path is going to be .next. I'm going to save this, and I'm going to create a commit called create a build artifact. Commit that, sync my changes up, pending no typos. And again, you got questions, throw any in the chat anytime. I'm trying my best to monitor the chat. I say that and then watch out miss a question, right? There we go. There's our new workflow build. There we go. We're building our project. And I don't know if you can tell in my voice, this is all pretty exciting to me. Just the ability to just kind of do it one line at a time, go check. If you got a typo, it'll tell you right away. If you don't have a typo, it just builds and gives you tons of logs and details. It almost over explains to you what's going on. Here we go. Upload static site content, runs actions upload artifact with static site. With the provided path, there'll be 154 files uploaded. Starting artifact upload. Artifact name is invalid. Container for artifact static site successfully created. Started upload of files. Then it gives you a lot more details. Artifact static site has been successfully uploaded. So that sounds like a success to me. If we go back out to the summary of this job, we'll see that build project has succeeded. And we have an artifact down here that's 8 megabytes called static site. If I click on it, the browser will download it. And you see I've been playing with this before. If I hit open file here in Windows, there's my static site content that we can use to host this site on a static site server. Um, this is the where I pitch many of Azure's wonderful static site services. Now, we're halfway there though, because we're building our Next.js website. We built our static site content automatically using GitHub Actions, and we now have the build half, our GitHub Actions workflow, building our static site content, putting in an artifact, and we now performed a smooth handoff. Now, the other half of our handoff is creating another release release job, and now this release job, it can wait until after the build job is done, but it doesn't have to run on the same agent. It doesn't have to run on the same hardware. It doesn't even have to run on the same OS, because all it needs to do is wait until after the build job is done and then download the artifact. The only thing tying it together is this artifact. So that separation of concerns, especially if you're a developer, should be really, really interesting to you. So let's actually implement that. Let's create a new job. We're going to call this release project. We create a new job called release project. We're going to name it release project. We're going to run it on, we'll run it on Ubuntu latest. You don't have to, but we will. It needs build project to run first. And for its steps, I think the only thing we're going to do for release project first is to download the site content. So now we have an upload static site content. Our first step is to download the static site content. So I'll create a step called download site content, and I need to do that somehow. So we have this action to upload artifact. Now we need to download our artifact. So we're going back to GitHub Actions. We have upload artifact. I guess what's the next example, right? I search for upload. Let's search for download. Well, apparently there's the equal and opposite effect here, right? There's a download artifact. And fortunately for us, it's pretty much the same syntax, but in reverse. Uses actions download artifact with name. So yeah, this is not very difficult. And they even recommend right after you do it to just run ls, so list the contents of the directory recursively just to see, what's in that directory. So let's do that. I'm going to grab this as is. So or I'm going to implement it exactly as they recommend. Uses actions download artifact v3. So uses actions download artifact at v3 with name static site, because that's the name of our artifact. And then our next step would be to view content of artifact, and that's going to just run ls recursively just to show us what was in that artifact. So download and view artifact. Let's commit that, hit the no typos. We should be regaled as heroes, right? So just jumping in, checking the chat, nothing right now, going back in, download a view artifact. So here's interesting. You see how we did this little line? That means release project depends on build project to run first. Now, These could definitely use two different agents. They might use the same agent, who knows? But they may use different agents. So build project is running. The build is already done. It's uploading the static site content. Once build project is done, then release project can run. All right, our artifact is uploaded. Now release project is running. There we go. And this is interesting because release project has ls recursively. You can see all that information. And somebody says, hey, are you able to download GitHub releases with that action? Or is it just artifacts? And I'm gonna just show that so everybody can say that. This action is specifically for artifacts, but there are actions to both create and download GitHub releases. I'm going to show that in give me about 5 or 10 more minutes. I'm coming. This is where I'm going to. We're downloading an artifact, and we're using that to create a GitHub release. That's where we're going with this. So you read my mind. This is pretty much where we're going. So we download an artifact and we're looking at the contents of that artifact. We will pretty much have the contents. And what we're going to do is now I'm not going to create a GitHub release with I don't somewhere along here 154 files. I'm not going to create a GitHub release with 154 files. Now if I go to GitHub Actions here and I say, okay, do they have a GitHub action to zip up a directory? They do not. And this is where I say, okay, and I talked about this in the first session. There's a marketplace, github.com/marketplace, where you can see all types of actions that are available from other people. Well, fortunately for us, there are actions to zip things up. And there's one here with 70 stars called zip release. It's going to do exactly what I want to do, where I can create a release archive that using a zip. Now, some actions that are in the marketplace do cost money, and a lot are free. This one is zip release is free. And this is the one we're going to use today because it's pretty easy to use and doesn't require a lot of configuration. So we're going to go ahead and try this one out. So it's one I've used quite a few times that I'm pretty fond of. So we're going to implement this one by just going in and just like we use any other action, I'm going to call this archive site content uses. And then I think it was the doctor 0 zip release. And it's instead of doing versions, I believe in this marketplace thing. And I'll pop a link to this, I'll pop an overlay. And by the way, everything I'm showing in the overlays, um, their links to them are in the description box. So if you missed the overlay, there are links in the description box. This one, the version just says the master branch. Oh, just a fun fact. The version numbers are actually indicative of what branch you're pulling that GitHub action from. And all these GitHub action names are really just org names and repository names. That's how they're organized. That if you ever wanted to create your own GitHub action. All right, so we're going to take the current content, turn it into a zip file with file name site.zip. All right. So we're creating a zip file called site.zip, and that's all I'm going to do so far. So create a zip file. Just want to make sure um, this third party action works before I move on to create a GitHub release. So just jumping in, creating a zip file. So building a project. While this is building and the zip is going, the next step is we're going to create a GitHub release. And that's actually two parts. It's super interesting. You have to actually create the GitHub release first. and then upload any assets you have to the previously created GitHub release. And this requires you to actually create identifiers for the release so that you can, in essence, create code to access it, like access variables in a release. So, like for instance, get the upload URL property of the release, and then use that to upload an asset to the release. It's an interesting concept, but it's pretty simple once you see it implemented. It's just one of those things. If you've never ran into it before, it can look absolutely daunting. But and I'll show an example. It's not terribly bad. It's just one of those things where um, there we go. So somebody asked if the artifact's not already zipped. I believe when you download it through the portal, it zips it up. But when you access the artifact, like you download the artifact as an action, you're just it's not zipped there. You actually have to create an archive of the artifact. So that's why there's a step to create an archive. All right. So here we go. We created a zip file with all 154 files in there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create a GitHub release. Now, this one we could go to GitHub Actions organization, and we're going to just type in create release. And this creates a release using the GitHub Actions release API. Now, this is interesting because there's some stuff here that's not obvious if you've never seen it before. So the part that's obvious is actions create release. That's pretty obvious. The part that's not obvious is that you need to set an environment variable, the GitHub token, using your GitHub token so that you can have access to the GitHub API to create a release. Now, fortunately for you, when you're using a GitHub action, your token's already set as a secret on your behalf. So secrets already has a property called GitHub token with your token already set. So if you just reference secrets.github token, it will already have your GitHub token already provided. So just typing in this string will be enough for you to set your GitHub token. Everything will be good to go. There's no settings you have to configure. You won't have to go register a GitHub token. There's no configuration. Further configuration needs to be done. But it's something that could throw you off if you've never seen it before. There's other secrets that are already predetermined and pre-configured for you that it's a whole wonderful rabbit hole you can dig into. There's another thing in here that might throw you off too. There's this GitHub property. There's a GitHub property with all sorts of details about your actual workflow run, things like your ref, your run number, things like metadata about the actual workflow run that you can use in that workflow that becomes really useful when you do things like semantic versioning. And I'm going to walk through a couple of examples of that when we create this release. So, we could do a whole webinar session on this by itself. So I'm going to try and stay as surface level as possible here. So we are going to create a simple GitHub release. So we're going to use actions, create, release, version 1. Keep it things simple. Just like we talked about earlier, we're going to do environment, and we're not even going to take any risks. We're going to copy GitHub token, just like they say from the documentation. No risk. And just like every other one, we're going to use a with statement. And they have some examples of things you could configure. But all the things I want to configure is tag name and release name. We're not going to set up a body. We're not going to configure a draft or pre-release. We're just going to leave all that to its default values. It's not going to be a draft. It's not going to be a pre-release. So for our tag name, I'm just going to set the tag name using that GitHub variable. One cool value you can use for GitHub variable is run number. GitHub actually keeps track of how many times you use GitHub workflows or GitHub Actions, how many workflows you've ran. So as you notice, I have ran GitHub Actions a couple of times. So I think I've ran about 5 times now. So the next time I run it would be the 6th time. So I have 5 runs. So next time I run it will be my 6. So my run number is currently 5. My next one will be 6. I can use that in my tags. I can just say run number. I can say use string concatenation, say v run number. I can do all sorts of cool stuff here. I can also say release name, release, and then paste in the GitHub run number just to do some cool, simple string concatenation, just so I don't have to go in and do anything complicated, right? So I'm going to create a simple GitHub release. Commit that, sync my changes up. Let's just see, make sure I don't have any typos. I'm just going step by step on purpose, just because I'm doing a lot today, right? Create a simple GitHub release. Just like we've done before, we're building our project. And just in case anybody's curious about this, I'm going to throw this up as a caption, the URL to this repo. And this URL is also in the description box for those who are curious. Actions slash create release. That actions org is just phenomenal for so many really cool GitHub actions. All right, so we built the project. We're in the release stage. We're in run number 6. So theoretically, if we have no typos, this should be GitHub release number 6. Now, of course, there's all sorts of really cool GitHub actions and tools you can use to implement semantic versioning. You can do tags. You can do uh, all sorts of cool stuff. It's just way more that we can get into today. I'm just showing you the simplest release and numbering possible. You can see our tag name, release name. If we go to the repo, there's release 6 with tag 6. So pretty simple stuff. Now you'll notice in our assets, we have our source code, but we don't have anything beyond that because we haven't actually uploaded anything to our release. If we go back to our GitHub Actions org, we'll notice that while we created a release, we actually haven't done anything to our release other than create. We need to actually upload a release asset to our release. And this is where things get a little funky. Creating a release is simple, but uploading a release asset requires us to do something a little funkier. We still have to do that environment GitHub token thing, but we need to specify upload URL, which is only possible after you create a release because you have to reference the release by going steps dot the identifier of the release dot outputs dot upload URL, and then specifying the path to the asset, giving the asset a name, which may or may not be the same as the asset's file name, and then a content type to the asset. That could get a little funky. And you have to do something you've probably never seen us do before, which is give a step a unique identifier, like a code identifier, so that you can reference it in a and I can't remember if this called it a function or a code block or script block. I can't remember what the syntax is called within GitHub Actions. All right, so let me show you a really simple example implementation of this. All right, so we have our create GitHub release here. So I'm going to give this an ID. I'm going to call this a create new release. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to create another new step called, I'm just making sure I don't have any typos, upload release asset uses actions upload release asset version 1. Same environment as create release. So nothing changes there. With, and this is where it gets really interesting. We go tag name, or actually instead of tag name, upload URL. And this is where we use that special syntax. Steps dot, and we use that unique identifier for the previous step to reference it. Dot outputs dot upload URL. We get the previous step upload URL. Asset path, and this is where we get to our site.zip file that we have from earlier. Asset name. Now, if somebody's downloaded multiple versions of our file, we don't really want them to have overlapping file names. So maybe I want to say site dash version, string concatenate GitHub run number dot zip, and then asset content type application zip. So let's walk through what I did just real quick. So I created a step to upload the release asset, same environment GitHub token. For the upload URL, I pointed to the previous step's outputs upload URL. For asset path, I said, hey, grab that site zip file I created earlier. For the name of the asset, I said site v, the run number. So this will be site v7.zip when we run it again. And this is a zip file for that content type. So upload zip file. Let's get that around. Sync the changes up. All right, let's give it a shot. Really excited to see if this works. I say that like I haven't tested this 100 times, but something about doing it live makes you extremely nervous, right? Building a project, like we haven't done this 30, 40 times at this point, but who knows, right? All right. So, and again, you got any questions, just throw them in the chat. We are getting really close to having something that um can continuously build itself, create release packages so that our developers can just download the latest static bits of the application and just grab those raw files while we still might be continuously deploying production ready bits to our prod site. And there goes our release job that ran successfully. If we go to release 7 that released just now, there's a site v7.zip. If we download that zip file, we'll see that there's our static site content. So everything works just exactly as we expected. If we go to the actual job, we still see that there's the static site artifact. If I try to download that, it'll match up almost exactly, or actually it should match up exactly with what was downloaded from the GitHub release. Even though the artifact is something that, I see in the GitHub action, the release is what I'm surfacing to the general public that I want them to see as part of my build release workflow. So this is where I want to stop today as far as continuous integration, just showing, us building something, creating this workflow where we're just having a this is just a to the moment build. Get if think about it, if we're building a console application, web application, where we want to get like bits in front of people, we want to build multiple variations of this. We can take it further. Like if we want to build a container image and we want to have a Dockerized version of this, where we want to have a package of this, where kind of almost like a side job, just constantly building a containerized version of this. I'm kind of putting ideas in your head because when we get to session 3, we're going to talk about taking this and pushing this out to a production cloud service, and that's where we're really going with this. And I'm kind of putting seeds in your mind about where we're going, and really looking forward to the final session in this series. So really looking forward to talking with everybody. The last part of this series, looking forward to wrapping things up. If you haven't seen our sibling series, we have a .NET series where we're doing the same things, but we're doing them from the Azure pipelines perspective. We look forward to seeing people over there. We have a playlist where we're talking about a lot of the same topics. So, please subscribe to our playlist if you haven't already. If you haven't, subscribed to our channel, please, check that out. If you haven't clicked on the links, we have tons of links in the description box where we are talking about where a lot of things I showed you today. They're on that they're on those hyperlinks. So look forward to seeing you all next week around the same time, where we will wrap up with talking about continuous deployment of the same technology. So again, we'll see you all next week.